Our guest this week is the magnificent Gemma Amor, who is just this absolute titan and force for good in UK-based horror and fiction and audio fiction.
And audio drama,
Oh,
too.
yeah. Yeah, we're going to be talking about podcasting because Gemma does a lot of it.
Have you listened to
all
No
fantastically
Sleep?
good.
Then you've
Then
probably
chances are you've heard some Gemma stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Gemma's new book, Full Immersion, is out now from Angry Robot.
Ooh, hold on, let me push the buttons.
And we will be talking about that as well. There are some content warnings for it, inevitably.
Yeah, so just some content warnings. Again, details are behind the link for folks who maybe don't want that level of detail or some spoilers. So the headline content warnings for tonight are death and dying, horror themes, mental health and trauma, and violence.
Mm-hmm.
These are content warnings for the book Full Immersion, which we'll be talking about this evening. But remember also, this is an interview, and so topics may kind of come up spontaneously. So our intrepid moderators, Ducky and Zalia, this evening will jump out ahead of any important content warnings that they have about and prevent those in advance. We are not joined by our lovely Wendy this evening, who is unfortunately on shifted work because of the Monday event. So she will not be joining us this evening. So we will send Wendy lots and lots of love from Valhalla.
Speaking very briefly, and this will be the only time we do it, of the Monday event, I also want to give a special shout out to Sir Hawk, who provided us with the wonderful
the adorable
opening
stream
fan
art. Yes.
There's been a lot of shit, really. That's basically what it boils down to. And yesterday, basically a high-end Twitter intellectual troll decided to do the yes, but what is science fiction or YA thing? And of course, everyone did the thing everyone's always conditioned to do, which is fall on their heads, because that's what they want. But our very good friend Jen Williams, who we should also have on, given all those kind of books and stuff.
Haven't we had Jen as a guest before?
I think we might have done.
We've been doing this for so long, I can't remember them all anymore.
But Jen introduced me to a truly fantastic.
I'm sorry.
I'm really sorry, Rebecca. So, truly fantastic piece of artwork of Tails the Fox from the Sonic games with this facial expression. And it is just a kind of, fuck is this shit?
Yes.
And Sir Hawk then crafted me with that exact same expression, wearing a She-Hulk shirt, on which Shulky has the exact same expression.
Exactly.
And it honestly made my day. So we wanted to put it on the stream.
So, shall we say hello to Gemma?
We will. Without further ado, we would love to introduce you to our friend Gemma.
Alrighty. So, hold on just 1 second. Let me make sure Gemma is here with us. Yes, you are. There you are.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Here. I didn't run away.
No, you didn't run away.
And we're very grateful to you for that.
I know. And more importantly, we have to call out how wonderfully artistically arranged all of your books are. Right there behind you, over your shoulder.
When I say Gemma's written a lot of stuff, I am not joking.
No, that's it. That's all of it. That's my entire bibliography there. All 9,000.
She wrote a whole entire cushion as well.
Yeah, I did.
Entire cushion.
I can only shout about 30 books per year.
Really? Somebody ought to tell us that. Oh boy.
So,
how are you?
How you doing?
I'm good. I am coming down from an insanely high career crazy week of madness.
Noes! Someone recognizes your brilliance. Dear.
Well, I mean, how dare they? And it's also that in itself is highly uncomfortable for me as a British person. I've had to endure a whole week of people being really nice to me, which is awful, and saying nice things about my work, and and I'm now in the site post book launch and other stuff. Emotional slide into the oblivion of doom that always inevitably follows any success or triumph in my life, because I'm very much all or nothing. But yeah, keeping busy to try and move on to the next thing, and you know how it is, juggling.
Yeah, we do. So are we okay to talk about the Amsterdam thing?
Yeah, no, of course.
Right.
Yeah,
because you did a film, dude.
I co-wrote a short film with a lovely Dutchman called Jeroen van Duvenboyd, which I have murdered.
Which is officially the best name on earth.
He's got that Dutch look going on, the sort of high neck turtlenecks and trendy glasses, and he's about 7,000 feet tall.
Full on jazz detective, always a good look.
I love it.
And I was thinking about this actually after I was in Amsterdam last week to see the premiere of that movie.
Nice.
And he'd hired like a cinema, like an indie theatre, and which used to be a mortuary, which was kind of a cool touch.
Very on brand.
Very on brand. And he did a screening, and the whole experience just absolutely blew my mind. But mainly because I was thinking that, because he reached out to me in 2020, so we were in like the height of lockdown, and he was like, "Hey, I've been. I think he'd heard me on No Sleep, but I can't remember exactly where he'd found me. And I'd been talking about, I think, postnatal depression, because that's kind of my thing now, I guess." And he was like, "I'm writing a short film about the kind of Victorian phenomenon of hidden mothers." And so for anybody that doesn't know,
I am somebody.
The Victorians, particularly in England, were obsessed with death and dying and documenting death and dying in various different ways. Not just in England, but it was quite a prevalent thing in England to
like
photograph
photography and mementos and.
Well, it was quite a common thing to photograph the deceased, and particularly children who had passed on, of which there were many in the Victorian era, as you can imagine. And in order to, I suppose, arrange those children in the most sympathetic manner possible, what often used to happen was that the mother would hold the child in the photograph, but she would veil herself completely in black. So her whole everything would be covered in a big black sheet. So this sort of child would be sitting on the lap of essentially a black cloaked ghost, in all these photographs. So it's a very evocative thing. And he came to me and he wanted to write a short film where that was the kind of main plot point. And then we quickly sort of realized that there was a real opportunity here to talk about lots of different things. So women's status in the Victorian era, postnatal stuff in the Victorian era,
literally
and how well
becoming furniture to hold the subject.
Literally becoming a photographic prop in the most traumatic of ways. God, we started off deep. And
it's okay. Let me just reiterate the content warnings for everyone, okay? Gemma's well known to the horror genre. Alasdair's in the pseudopod shirt. We're gonna get a little dark this week, go ahead.
My husband was like, "Make sure people don't think of you in 10 years' time as the dead infant woman." And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably something. My next one needs to be about fluffy kittens." But it was just a really good opportunity to write a couple of brilliant female characters in a kind of period piece. So we ended up in the script, we went through various iterations of the script, and then I was sitting in a cinema watching it on the big screen with my literal name, on a title card, in a packed out little indie cinema.
How wonderful.
And I'd not seen it before. I'd not seen a final cut of it or anything. I'd only seen the trailer and a few stills from set. So I had no idea how it was going to come out. And it came out beautifully. And the acting was on point, the cinematography, everything. I'm just blown away by how it related to what I had in my head. So that was a big old moment, and that was like 2 days after my first traditionally published book launched as well. So it was just
gonna say maybe just go to bed until the royalty statement comes out and just be like, "No, I peaked. Don't bother me. I finished the year early."
I've spent all my money already on travel this year, and I'm like, I'm not going to earn it back. It's fine. So we don't do this gig for money. But yeah, it was a big week. It was a mind-bogglingly big week for me, and now everything feels a little bit like, I have to do the laundry and cook.
Week of Tuesdays. No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
Oh my gosh, there's so much there to talk about.
So what's going to happen with the movie? Is it hitting the festival circuit? Is it going to be available online somewhere? What's on your mug?
Yay!
Beautiful. Well
Excellent
done.
mug.
Yeah, so I think the plan is to release it to several festivals and do the festival circuit with it first.
Nice.
Because it would be nice to see it get a bit of recognition in those kind of scenes.
Yeah, of course.
And target kind of the US and the UK a bit more as well, because it was a very Dutch affair as well. That was the other thing. The whole cast and crew and everybody are Dutch, even though it's set in England. So the screening was fun because the whole thing was in Dutch. I have no idea what any of them said. It could have been like, she was awful, but I was really good, but I don't think so. So yeah, I think sort of just keeping it in the Netherlands is probably not what Jeroen wants. It's certainly not what I want. I'm so sorry for murdering your name, Jeroen, if you're watching this. And then I would like to have some sort of option for people and sponsors and investors, because we did sort of do a bit of fundraising for it to be able to see it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hope is to, like, I guess, reach out to some streamers, and if that doesn't fly, then we'll host it somewhere online to be streamed, I suppose.
Lovely.
So that everybody can see it.
This might be an email I have to send you after the show, but do you know either
Of course, you're going to connect her with somebody now.
Miles? I've known the man for 30 years and I can't quite remember his last name. Miles or Tony Hitwell from the Zomblogalypse web series.
No.
I will introduce you to Miles and Tony because they are a big part of the indie horror cinema scene in the North.
Cool.
And I know they've been trying to get a US distributor and a European distributor for Zomblog for a while.
Okay.
I think you would get on like a house on fire with them.
Happy days.
And they might know people who could help you out.
Cool.
So I will introduce you this week.
Hey, Cassie, thank you so much.
Amazing. I'm not going to say no.
Right. Okay, so let's get this straight. You have a traditionally published prose novel, a movie. We know you write audio drama. We've been in the audience for a live No Sleep performance.
You have.
Your stories.
You were fucking great at, by the way.
Stop it! This is too much. I don't like it. I'm English.
You've written.
You're in the Californian zone now, Gemma.
You've
British.
written other audio dramas. 6 Rooms. No, Six Rooms was the novel.
Calling Darkness.
Calling Darkness was the other audio drama.
Holy shit! That is such a fucking good show. Do you want to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, actually, so season 2, it's worth stating that season 2 is finally underway after a good couple of year hiatus. I have to be upfront about that. And in the first season, I co-wrote with S.H. Cooper, who's another kind of very well-known No Sleep author. And she's doing good things in the indie horror scene. And we sort of shared writing duties for that, and I did a lot of the behind the scenes stuff and the production stuff, and sort of with her and Christina, who was our editor. And I got sort of several years in after it was after that first season came out, we had a bit of a breather because it's an intense thing creating an audio drama, and particularly creating it with little to no money. And we were very kind. We had David Cummings is the showrunner of No Sleep Podcast, very kindly sort of invested his time and some income in the show. So we were able to secure Kate Siegel to do some wonderful narration and kind of serve as our exposition angel, if you like.
I remember the first time I heard that, Karen, I went, oh,
it was
there was going on here.
Very deliberate decision to have a character that could look down on everything so that it could explain what was happening without explaining it in a very boring way, if that made sense.
Yeah.
But I think after that, unfortunately for the show, but fortunately for me, things started to sort of take off career-wise. And I had to make the decision for season 2 to just step back, just solely because I had to focus on, I guess, paid work. I had to
pay so many hours in the day and you got to
pay the rent,
you know.
And it's a hugely time-consuming thing. So I'm still in season 2. Gloria, my character, is still, until Coops murders her horribly, which I'm sure she will. She's still there, very much there, but in terms of the writing and everything else behind the scenes, I've sort of stepped back. So that's mostly Coops' bag now. But the other thing is also it's been moved over to Realm, who are now hosting it, which is hopefully going to do nice things for the show in terms of advertising and extra listeners and stuff. So
talking about podcast networks could be a whole nother show.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I mean, you are. Calling Darkness is kind of perfectly suited for Realm because they really like singular narrative, multiple seasons.
Yeah, sure.
So you fit over there beautifully.
Yeah.
Also, that speaks an awful lot to, without putting on my wizened podcaster hat, that spoiler, it's always on. That speaks an awful lot to how well they're diversifying. Because for a long time, Realm, back when they were Serial Box, was like, here are 5 original properties, and hey, you guys like Iron Man, right? Well, here's kind of Iron Man. And seeing them steer in and embrace podcasting like that is really cool.
And they're really hungry for horror content at the moment as well. I've been speaking to them a lot about various different bits and pieces, and they're very actively pursuing the kind of horror audio drama space in particular. So people are catching on sort of 10, 15 years down the line.
We're on track for the overnight discovery, Gemma. We
are on track for an Entertainment Weekly article or something along those lines saying audio dramas are the new old-time radio.
Audio dramas have returned.
Well, especially now with this thing with Serial, with development in the court case, and it's brought up the whole original podcast and blah, 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 blah.
Which apparently was quite incorrect in many ways, factually.
Very much so, which is why it infuriated me. But speaking of whole nother hours, don't do podcasts about currently active court cases, folks.
Yeah.
Says the lawyer / podcaster. Okay. Yeah.
So Calling Darkness Season 2, where I'm not going to say you are just a member of the cast, but you are a member of the cast. Brilliant. The thing I find really interesting about that is you have in many ways...
I can't stop yawning. Please excuse me. It's not your fault. I think it's just there's bright lights and I don't have enough water and I'm just going to keep yawning and it's not because I'm bored.
I am very boring. I am.
You are not boring, dear heart.
In every way conceivable.
Gemma, we have seen you act. We have talked to you at tremendous length. We've read and listened to your words. You are one of the least boring human beings I have ever encountered.
See?
I remember the first time we chatted at Pod UK.
It was Pod UK, wasn't it?
Yay, Pod UK!
I was 3 months into a 6-month cough, and you were so amazingly British. You were just like, every few words I had to stop and
bless you. I don't remember that at all. That was pre-pandemic, so that period of time doesn't exist for me anymore.
That was the period of time where you went from Glasgow Fantasy Con to Pod UK, and you didn't get well in between them.
Oh no, that was a bad year. But meeting you and chatting to you at Pod UK was a massive, massive uptick, and it was really cool.
It was a good event. I hope they bring it back.
They might be.
I hope so as well. I was hugely fond of Pod UK. I thought it serves a unique niche, which so many people in the UK in particular are really kind of desperate for, which is a podcasting event that is not a corporate sellout.
But also a UK con, which is a thing I've come to realise because I've been to a couple this year as well. And what I've found, but maybe I need to keep going, is the difference between US cons and UK cons is vast in terms of atmosphere and ambience. And I found that Pod UK, even though it was kind of small, it had that like joie de vivre that I like.
It has
about
that
US cons, like just friendly and supportive, and
we're all poor together and we don't want to do the same things together.
Right.
That kind of linked arms vibe.
Yeah. There was room for everybody at the table, at every table, and I liked that. And I sometimes, particularly with British people, and I think this is a cultural thing, we are very cliquey by nature and we can be quite exclusive and a bit hard to like get to know in stranger situations. So people tend to go to cons in the UK and just hang out with each other. Which I didn't find at Pod UK, which I really liked. So yeah.
No, I think we all a lot of people put in a lot of work of like mixing people up. Like that's where we met. This is gonna sound horrible, but Quantum Leopard is the only thing I can remember about his name right now.
Tim Meredith.
Not Tim Meredith.
Alexander Genuel.
Huh?
Alexander Genuel.
No. The
Nathan Blades.
Yes, that's it. Sorry, that was a total tangent, but no, we met a lot of really good people at Pod UK, and it's the same way. I completely agree with you. I hope they do more of it. I know pandemic happened, and then we all tried to kind of duplicate some of that experience with things like parties and stuff, and it just wasn't the same.
I agree.
But
I'm sorry, that was a tangent. Thank you, Rebecca. You were correct. So we go on tangents a lot. Like
That's fine.
We have emojis for the tangents that we go on. So
It's fine.
The
it's
chat
very
was like,
sweet that Marguerite says
yes.
we go on tangents.
I do sometimes as well. I help. I contribute.
You carry the things.
I carry the things.
I'm just about to invest in a private ADHD diagnosis for myself. So tangents are like literally how my brain operates. They kind of. Do you remember how Billy Connolly used to do his stand-up sketches, and he would start on like one narrative thread, and then about 2 hours later, he's told you 55 different stories before he comes back full circle. That's how my brain is. It's like tangent city.
I have several friends who are at various stages of that diagnosis. I think 2 or 3 have got an official diagnosis. 1 is on the way. And in every single case, it has helped immeasurably.
Fingers crossed.
And it's not a magic wand or anything. It's just the way
it's validation and a whole lot of other things on top of that.
The validation thing in particular, because I keep thinking of like all of the basic normal human things for the last 40 years that I've struggled with, because I thought just naturally that I was a bit of a garbage human. And it's like, I'm not. Maybe I actually have a brain that just doesn't work the same way that other people's brains do. And that, like that, allowing myself to then be kind to myself for that reason alone is probably going to be worth the money I'll have to spend on the private diagnosis, because the NHS waiting list is about 70,000 years long.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah.
Uncannily, you are the second person I heard articulate that today.
Oh, really?
There is a very, very good, incredibly New York wrestler called Eddie Kingston. Who is hugely open about mental health. And he just, with the blessing of the promotion that he worked for, he basically just released an 8-minute PSA talking about his mental health and toxic masculinity and how that's impacted it. And the line that he finishes on is, please remember, my normal is not your normal.
Right.
We make our own normal.
Yeah.
I don't really know where we lost our way in forgetting that as well. Like, to me, it's a very basic human concept that we're all different and that no two of us are the same. Even twins, identical twins, have character variations. And like, I don't understand why all of a sudden we've sort of moved in the direction where we expect people to behave in like a uniform way in terms of our brain and our neurodiversity and
the
stuff.
Short version is capitalism.
Well,
should be on a t-shirt. The short version is capitalism.
Right?
You know?
Everything.
If everybody's forced to conform with the same box, then you can do the same advertising and standards and marketing and everything.
And I've always vehemently hated labels, boxes of any description, shape, size, form. It goes back to what you were saying about the discourse yesterday about what constitutes sci-fi and all the rest of it. I try not to jump on those things too much because, like, I'm not a big fan of it turning into a dog pile. But at the same time, I like, anytime I see someone go, this is categorically this and this is categorically that, I just go, I can't, I can't bear it. Like,
are you a marketing firm? Because if you're not a marketing firm, I don't care.
I mean, I used to do marketing. I did marketing for 10 years as well, which is like 10 years of my soul that I'll never get back. And I used to
but you probably have excellent copywriting skills.
I literally used to write copy for a stainless steel urinal company. So I would write 500-word essays on pisses.
That needs to be the title of your autobiography. 500 words on stainless steel pisses.
It was great. And if it wasn't that, it was eye wash stations. So squirting water into your eye when you've dropped acid on your face. And then if it wasn't that, it was insulated conservatory ceilings. So, and then before that, I was selling shit to people that didn't want it. Which is great.
So, which is a long way about saying if you had to identify your work with any genre, it would be horror.
Yeah. I've always had an affinity. Like, I desperately want to write a new audio drama series about an office that is a kind of horror comedy setup.
I have the concept for you. It's one we've been working on forever. It's
because like I've been in corporate, I've been in sales, I've seen everything. I've seen it all. Right? It is good fodder.
So we should collaborate on this because our idea was, okay, so what if you're IT support for people casting spells?
Ooh,
Like people
I
call and
that.
say, hey, this summoning didn't go correctly, I need help. You know,
did you try rebooting the spell?
Did you try rebooting the spell?
Have
Did
you tried sacrificing another goat?
You know,
have you downloaded the latest version of the necromancy browser that you need?
Oh, see, but now based on this whole nonsense, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you're trying to summon a robot? Let me transfer you to sci-fi. Click. You know.
Hang on, are there any elements of magic inherent in what you're trying to spellcast? If so,
do you have the fantasy upgrade package? Right? I mean, because you could take that whole crappy pay for support model,
right,
and just apply it to genre wars.
I'm sorry, we don't support speculative fiction anymore. We phased that out with the last update.
Yeah.
It's more fiction as service.
Fiction as a service. Don't start with things like that because there's just so much we could do with this concept, right, Gemma?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Absolutely do this. I've tried turning it off and turning it back on again, right?
Well, sacrifice something else. Ugh. Anyway.
Was that a tangent? I can't tell.
If it was,
I think it was a glorious tangent. If it was,
it was terribly
how
amusing.
It should be.
Yeah.
It's just the natural flow, like when Jeff Goldblum is sitting in the car and he's stroking the back of Laura Dern's hand and talking about chaos theory and little raindrops, and you don't know which way it's going to fall. That's us. With the little raindrops on Laura Dern's hand.
Were Laura Dern flirting with Jeff Goldblum?
Well, I think she was, but she was doing
the two of them were definitely flirting in that scene, for sure.
She was only doing it to piss off a Sam.
See, it's an unsuccessful attempt at a polycule. So let's just move on.
That's what AO3 is for.
That is what AO3 is for. Yes. Exactly.
And Jurassic Park is also a horror movie, and I stand by that.
It's absolutely a horror movie.
I know I just said I don't like definitions and labels, and I've completely contradicted myself. But fuck it, I had a good week last week, so I'm allowed. And Jurassic Park is a horror movie, and nobody will convince me otherwise.
There is a scene involving a component of Samuel L. Jackson. Therefore, horror.
Therefore, horror. Are there partial bodies? Therefore, horror. Well, I mean, the whole idea of action horror or sci-fi horror is so well developed as its own genre, by all means. I mean, look at it. They're remaking Dead Space, one of the original horror.
The devil's advocate. The devil's advocate in me wants to kind of get to the root of, I think, what was trying to be said. In that it was taking an initial statement from Ted Chiang, who was initially kind of saying that in order to write science fiction, it has to be grounded in certain things. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge fan of Ted Chiang's work, and I'm kind of hoping he was slightly taken out of context.
Well, we know what JCO was like.
But I also know, like, it's completely fine as well to have like just a space to talk and sound things out and have opinions and just work through things. And if it's a logic and a thought process that makes sense to you, then I don't think we want to get to a position either where, like, I don't know, even if it's an opinion we don't agree with, where someone feels like they can't just say what they think, what their truth is. And I know that's very
but we're not basic, good at that in genre, are we? Right? There are a lot of things that we should be talking about that we're not. And then we rely on people like Jeanette Ng standing up and saying, no, Campbell was a piece of shit. We need to do something about that to force a catalyst of change. That's a whole nother hour talking about all the fights we need to pick in genre. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I'm still hung up on the whole just kind of it's almost my normal isn't your normal, you know. Especially when it comes to genre stuff. As you were saying that, the back of my brain as it's wanted to do goes, this is why NCIS is a cyberpunk show.
I haven't seen that show in years and years and
There's
years.
an early season where they fight an artificially intelligent Humvee that has
Is
killed a man.
there?
Oh, yes.
I love that. That's very X-Files. I love that.
Very. Yeah, it is basically Buzzcut X-Files for quite a lot of its...
Buzzcut X-Files.
Buzzcut X-Files.
That's an Abrams show, isn't it? Is that the other one, Bruckner.
I think it's a Donald P. Belisario one, which means the Quantum Leap crossover is inevitable. In fact, I think NCIS has now survived so long that the original Quantum Leap lived, died, has been rebooted, and there may be a Quantum Leap crossover in the final season of Core NCIS. That's wild. It's absolutely wild.
It's also proof of getting old, you know.
It's not old, it's vintage. We've been over this.
Yes.
See, that's another thing as well. Like this year for me is bonkers because I've also turned 40, and I know people tell you not to get hung up on your age and all, and age is just a number. But like it's sorry, it's a good opportunity to like these significant well, first off, I'm a massive princess when it comes to birthdays anyway. I'm like, do special things for my birthday. Because I think
I can see you going full birthday Veruca salt, Gemma.
When I grew up, like my nan and granddad always made a really big deal out of it, and always like it wasn't about money, but they always just made a big effort. So so I always become a bit of a diva around my birthday. But this one in particular was like when it's a significant milestone of any sort, I will always attach significance to anything. Like I'll be sentimental about this bottle of water in about half an hour when I finished it. And like, this is the bottle of water that I drank when I was on the EA Twitch stream on the 21st of September, 2022.
You're amongst friends.
But like when you turn 40 and it's a significant age like that, a milestone age, it just forces you to think about things.
It's a good opportunity for reflection.
It really is. And I'm trying to be much more aware of that and more reflective in a non-high vis jacket sort of way. But like just generally analysing myself and other people around me a lot more. In order to try and get a better understanding of not just who I am, but how I like fit in a little bit, or how I want to fit in.
Yeah. One of the things,
and that's been significant. Like this year has been so significant in that. Like maybe because my confidence is higher because of the stuff happening in my career.
Well, look at what you've just done,
right? Or maybe they feed each other. Maybe the career stuff is a result of me sitting down and going, actually, this is what I want to be and who I want to be a bit more, and those two things like help each other out. Like I don't know, it's been a mind-blowing year, particularly after like the last 2 years of utter chaos and misery.
Yes.
To like come out of it and then just go bam into all these things is fucking hell, you know. I can't quite catch my breath, but in a good way.
But in a very good way. One of the things I've heard about like major milestone birthdays is that, you know, you stop sweating more and more of the small stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty significant for me when I turned 30. I very much had a whole, no, I don't have time for X. I don't have time for Y. I'm not going to prioritize that in my life anymore.
Right. And boundaries are something that over the last 5 years in particular, everyone always like asks me various different questions on work related stuff. Like, how do you handle social media? How do you pick your projects? How do you do this? And I always come back to boundaries. Just like it's always my top answer because learning how to establish them and learning how to define them for yourself has been the single biggest like revelatory thing of my adult life, I think. And I don't think I knew enough about myself before that to do that until just more recently. But my God, it's awesome being 40 and having boundaries.
There's nothing wrong with writing yourself a mission statement and saying, this is what I want to do.
I do it every year. So I have, I was going to show you a notebook, but I'm using it to like prop up my monitor. It's extremely annoying because I'm very classy. But I have like every year I sit down and I plan, like I draw it into 4 and I have like personal life, family life, like health and fitness goals, and then work. And then I just write down like 2 or 3 like intentions, I guess, for each one of those. And when I get to the end of the year, I look at it and I tick off what I've done and tick off what I haven't. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And then that just sets me up for the next year. And it's a nice thing to to
The
see.
back of our door in the office has a
Mhm.
giant. I am a huge fan of that 2x3 foot like sticky paper.
Yeah.
You know, like they get at conference rooms where they like, you know, you
Mhm.
write on the board and they pull them off. So we have a pad
Yeah.
of that, and that is exactly what we did. There's like his goals, my goals,
Yeah.
company goals, and then
Squad goals.
I'm sure squad goals is on there somewhere. But yeah, very much the other thing that I'm pretty sure I'm a Velveteen adult. No, remember we said, you know, setting yourself goals and growing as a person is good. You don't have to grow up. Only suckers
I'm never gonna grow up.
You
I
folks have seen
literally-
my Transformers shelf, right?
I literally laughed at a Uranus joke on Twitter about like an hour ago. So like,
I can't
there's no
believe
chance
they're
of me ever
gonna
growing
let
up.
they're like opening that mission up for public naming. I'm like, what are you doing?
I mean, you can't help but imagine 6 months from now, you know, there's some very, very awkward meeting and all these NASA executives not making eye contact. And Professor Bastard at the other end of the table going,
What did the name is? Yeah, Rebecca, apparently there's going to be a mission to Uranus in the solar system. And they are opening it up for public naming.
Sphincter McSphincter face it is.
I just...
welcome to the stream, we're all 12.
Right. Exactly.
We started off with like, yeah, deceased children and death photography, so it's like
This is what we have to do. You see, I have no room to talk, Kevin. I still remember.
Yes, but who's gonna tell JC what genre this chat channel is? Anyway, moving
Right?
on. Let's just move on.
I have in the past sent Marguerite an image of a Lego figure of an astronaut bent over with a grey alien Lego figure firing a laser at his bottom with "Hi, I'm 12" as the
Yes.
caption.
Excellent.
Every time I get an image titled "Hi, I'm 12" from Alasdair, I usually know what it is.
I was almost late to the stream because I was adding in videos of the worst musical video game in history to this week's newsletter. It's called Trombone
Have
Champ.
you heard about this?
I haven't heard. I've seen people sharing
Oh.
things on I'm not very good with the whole video game. I know that makes me a
So,
terrible nerd, but I'm
have
not a big gamer.
You've seen
like,
things like Guitar Hero, right? Where you have to
I
perform
vaguely
a series
remember
of
playing
manual
that.
dexterity tasks
Yeah.
vaguely associated with playing a musical instrument.
Okay.
Well, the premise of this game is that the instrument you are playing is not the melody of the song, but it is the harmony of the song. And
Okay.
the instrument they have selected is the trombone.
Nice.
And
One.
and because a lot of the like songs you play on a trombone involve slides, and the game style involves a very loose and comfortable slide, it's very easy to overshoot or undershoot the note. So the hilarious performance of the melody lines from these songs is destroying me every time I watch them.
Even perfect, even someone who hits every note still sounds like they're in a drunken tuba bouncing downhill.
There
It's
is nothing.
great.
I maintain there is nothing funnier than dissonance, like in musical stuff. And my prime example of that is the video that was going and it was doing the rounds, and it's the scene in the
Thank you,
Titanic
Zoya.
where Rose is being drawn like in the buff by Leonardo DiCaprio, and somebody's recorded the soundtrack for the Titanic with a recorder, and it's just really.
I remember
Really, do
that.
you remember this? And it's really
Ah.
off key, and then like it keeps panning out and coming back, and he's just drawing like the shittest, like stick man, ugliest, like
I love
gnarly.
it. I love it. That
and
is
it's
the
just going,
best.
and it's fucking so funny. I can't stop. Every time I see it, I like, absolutely die.
Oh, thank you. I'd forgotten that existed, and now
Isn't
that
that
plays in my
it's
head.
so funny and so silly, and just that's what I like. I genuinely, this is the thing. Like we work in quite a heavy genre, but I do very much just like stupid,
But
silly.
Don't
stuff.
you find that all the people that you work with in the horror genre and industry are like the most ridiculous goofballs of people?
Absolutely. I mean, most of the No Sleep cast are complete and utter dorks, in the nicest possible way.
having shared recording time with Erica, I can absolutely attest to that.
She is an extremely silly and lovely and brilliant person in all the ways. Got a lot of time for Erica. She's fab.
Nice. We should probably talk about your book now,
Tell
since
us
we've
about the
been
book.
nattering on for 45 minutes.
Fuck it. I've been doing that all week. I
Well,
wrote a
good.
book,
Then
it's
you've got
boring.
it down. You've got it down to a pattern. Give us the book pattern.
Okay, I will show you the book. 'cause
Yahoo
I have
book!
kind of
Visual aid.
prepared. There is a visual aid, although that's an advanced review copy, but just ignore that bit up there. That's the cover. Oh, my camera's struggling.
There you go. You're all good.
Yeah, I wrote a book and it's out. And it's actually in bookshops now as well, which is
And it's through Angry Robot.
yes, it is, with the lovely Angry Robot people who who are very prescient to what we're on about. Specialize in genre fluid, mishmash blendy stuff. So
Genre fluid sounds like something they're gonna sell in Korean skincare shops here pretty quick.
Would you like some
by the
genre
way,
fluid?
Marguerite has offered me in the past skincare advice that I would quite happily have paid much money for if I had it, because
I forgot we had that conversation.
my skin has done nothing but shine
Good.
since
I'm so
we
glad.
spoke. So yes.
I'm so glad you took that up.
Yeah, I have an ebook out.
It's a book. It's got a lot of words in it.
It is. I guess it's quite a significant book for many reasons. For anyone, I suppose, out there who is watching that isn't familiar with my kind of stuff, it's not my first book that I've released. I think I've got 7 or 8 floating around out there now. And I come from a self-published and kind of indie publishing background. So this is my first traditional book, which means it's stocked by a publisher in kind of mainstream bookshops and marketed for me. And there's a publicist and I had an advance and all the rest of it. So it's a very different kettle of fish to self-publishing in many, many different ways. And it's significant for me because it's also, I would say, it's like 50% straight autobiography, just in terms of like
Drawing
it deals
from
with
life.
things. Yeah, it deals with things that happened to me and my family, and my in particular my struggle with postnatal depression and mental health stuff. So it's a big old scary one for me because it's extremely raw and exposing and makes me very vulnerable. Which I'm always that's kind of my thing anyway. I've always been somebody that overshares in every situation. And like my work is always a bit autobiographical and I always get quite deep quite quickly. Even if it's a comedy script, there'll always be quite a raw element to it.
Do you want to read us the blurb maybe from the back or the back?
Yeah, let's see if so basically, well, the blurb on the back is terrible, so I won't read that. But the basic concept is there is a traumatized young woman called Magpie who one day discovers her own dead body. Sort of lying on the bank of a river underneath the Bristol Suspension Bridge. And she has horrendous amnesia, so she can't really remember anything about her life and what led her to this point. She doesn't know why she died. And she's accompanied by a mysterious friend who kind of just materializes. And he decides to help her uncover the mystery of why she died. Unbeknownst to her, she's actually taking part in a experimental form of mental health therapy, which is based within a virtual reality setting in a scientific laboratory in the basement building of the Bristol University. So that's the kind of basic premise of it. And it's kind of like, it's part detective novel, it's part autobiography, it's part speculative fiction, it's part science fiction, it's part dark fantasy, maybe.
Yeah,
that tracks.
Fie on your genre boundaries.
With some other things in there as well. It's intensely personal. It was extremely difficult to write and rewrite and keep rewriting. And then I went and recorded an audiobook version of it in a booth for 3 days as well in London, which was intense.
Oh my god, dude! Please tell me there was wine.
There was wine. Especially after I checked into my first hotel in London, it was the grimmest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I think I remember this on Twitter. You're like, I'm not staying here.
Like, I didn't even want to like brush against the walls in case I got tuberculosis. It was just so grim, and there was like semen everywhere. And just, it was like, you know, that kind of thing that if I'd had a black light I would have
Oh,
been blinded by how much fluid there was. It was gross. It was so grim. But once I'd sorted that out, yes, there was lots of wine. And that's actually, it was an interesting experience, because when you write a book, particularly when I write a book, and I've said this on other interviews, like, my process is messy because my brain is messy. So I always liken it to like stringing beads onto a necklace, right? And then I'll string them on, and sometimes I'll take some off and rearrange them and put more in this way. And but eventually I'll have a necklace. That's how I write a book. You sort of in and out, and it's piecemeal.
Mm.
And then when you edit it, you obviously read it from start to finish, but you still edit it in chunks. And then when you copy edit and line edit and all the rest of it, it's all done in chunks. Sitting in an audio booth with only the sound of your own voice in your ears and one sound engineer in the next room
For hours, for
reading
days.
it aloud to yourself and doing all the voices, and I had no appreciation to quite how intense it was as a book, and as a reading experience. I experienced it as a reader for the very first time.
Was it your choice to narrate your own book?
Yeah, I said I wanted to. I'd done another audiobook for Hayley Piper, The Possession of Natalie Glasgow, which I'd really enjoyed doing. Well, that was a very tiny one. This was like nearly 100,000 words, so it was a challenge. But I did find myself that first day sat in the booth just kind of going, fuck's sake, why did I say I would do this? But I wanted to do it because it's my story. I don't want to make a habit of doing audiobooks, I don't think, unless I can use a booth, a sound booth, and someone else can do all the punch and roll and all the editing for me, because I find
that's the most time-consuming bit.
It's just absolutely, it takes so much time. I just don't have the time or patience to do the editing like that. So my opportunities for like being recruited into a lovely sound booth where that's all done for me are going to be kind of few and far between, I think. But I think it was the right decision, and it's out on Audible now, and people are starting to sort of give me feedback and telling me how powerful I think it is, perhaps because it's me talking in my own voice, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And
no,
also
I can totally see that.
Because of the distance that the process kind of, as you were talking about, because of the distance the process gives you from the text, and the fact that you're discovering it as well, then I would guess there is no artifice to that. That your responses are not the kind of familiar responses of, I've read this 1,000 times and wish to set it on fire at least twice, because all authors do. It's you're coming to it as the reader's coming to it, and that's a really powerful empathy generator between the reader and the text.
There's a couple of scenes, particularly towards the end, as things sort of ramp up, that are things I'd never dealt with personally, that through the act of writing them I obviously began to deal with. But I think I wrote them in a bit of a fugue state, and I think I edited them in that kind of blinkers on way, where I was like, I'm sort of not looking directly at you, but I'm looking, like, don't look in the mirror, because the ghost will look back, sort of thing. And then when I was reading it aloud, and I had to perform it as well, so it's not just straight reading, I had to perform and go through the anguish and read aloud the descriptions and things. It really hit me how serious some of that was, and actually quite how poorly I was as well, which I kind of knew because other people in my life had told me, you were a fucking mess during those few years.
Thank you, love you too.
I was, so it was wholly deserved, but I don't think it was until I heard it coming out of my mouth in that kind of way that I finally absorbed it. As a sounds wanky, but
no, not at all. It's one of the
truth. It became a truth, and
it's one of the powers of audio fiction, isn't it? It's the ability to we engage with a story in a different way in prose on a page than we do engage with a story that we are listening to, that is being told to us.
Exactly.
So having that cognitive dissonant experience makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So it was, and I think that was also why the whole lead up to this novel and the launch of it has been such a big emotional thing for me as well. Cathartic in so many ways, but kind of terrifying and just exhausting. And then it came out, and it's all the euphoria surrounding that and the happiness. And now I'm starting to because I'm just so emotionally exhausted, which is why it's, you know, I'm still in therapy, and that's something that I actively sort of chat to my therapist about, and that's very helpful. And you know, it also, I think like in the way my 40th birthday is like a milestone. This is a sort of milestone event that might help me put some of that to bed a little bit as well, emotionally. Like
I can absolutely see that. Yeah.
been through the mill now enough times, and I've done it in interviews and podcasts and, you know, the whole shebang. I think I'm going to park that now for a while, because I've confronted it enough times. So so it's very good for me in that sense too, because it means I can move on and write fluffy kittens, which is what the next book is about. It's totally not.
Totally. Can I read you something from the chat? If it's not too personal a question, how did you decide to write something that drew so closely from your own experiences? And
sure.
This person says, I'm asking as a writer who struggles to know how much of myself I want to put into my writing.
Well, those are two different questions. We'll separate those out, because they're two very different valid trains of thought in a way. The first part of that is, how did I decide? And the simple answer is I didn't. When I first started writing this, I wasn't writing a novel. I've told this story multiple times, but I was really unwell, mentally unwell. I was unemployed. My son started school. I suddenly found myself alone with a lot of time on my hands. I'd always wanted to write. I'd always been a writer, but never had the time to finish or complete anything. And suddenly I was in a position where I could focus on that a little bit more. So without really knowing what I was going to write or who I was going to write it to or any of it, I would just rock up at a cafe. I had enough sort of leftover pay-wise from the job I was made redundant from to be able to afford like a coffee every day. And I would open my laptop, and they were very good and patient about it, considering I would stay there for hours every day and just have like one little flat white. But and then I would just start free writing, and literally what came out of me, because I was in such a distressed state, was just verbal diarrhea. It was just dumpage. It was just shit. I need to get all these things out, and it was talking about how I felt at the time, talking about how I felt about things in my past, talking about items and objects that was important to me, just talking about like a series of diary entries pretty much, but really incoherent ones that made no sense to anyone but me. And then I got very attached to what I was writing, because the words started to stack up, and there were a lot of them. And before I knew it, I had like 40,000 words, which is a good first third of a book. And I was looking at them one day as I was slowly getting better and I was going through therapy, and I was like, you know, I could probably do something a bit more structured with this. So I started to play around with characters and settings and all the rest of it. I wrote in a suspension bridge, you know. I then started thinking about, how do I make some of this stuff like coherent? Because all it was like a dump of stuff, right? It didn't make any sense at all to anybody. How do I make this coherent? How do I frame this? And I started to also think about, like, let's say that you were looking at your own life and all the things that upset you, right? If you had to present that to yourself in a way that you could access and interact with, or like the things that have happened to you and the hurt and the pain and the grief and trauma, what would that look like physically in a real world sense? What would that look like in a way that you could interact with? And the idea of like a gallery came into my head. It was a bit of a thought experiment, I guess. Like, what if you could walk through a gallery of your own experiences? And it was full of alcoves, and in each alcove there was an object or an item that reminded you of a time in your life or an experience or something that was significant to you, so that you could then interact with that. And that started to like build and become a novel. And then what happened was, concurrently with that, I was doing a lot of other writing. I was healing all the time. I was getting some success. And I was approached by Angry Robot. He sort of said, do you have anything novel length that you can send us? And me being me, knowing full well that this never happens, because normally you have to have an agent and sub and do the whole thing, I was like, I didn't, but I'll tell them I have. And then I realized I had this book. So why don't I try and do something more with this book and send it to them? And that's what happened. So I just I then started to think about how to make it accessible to a reader that wasn't me. And that's where the speculative and sci-fi elements came in. So to answer your question, I didn't really make a conscious decision. It just organically kind of happened. If we're talking about like how much of yourself should you put into your work, or if you're hesitant to, I think two things. I think as an artist and a writer, you're best when you're like most true to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever feels good for you is generally the benchmark. If you're talking about experiences, however, that do involve perhaps other members of your family or friends or anything like that, the only thing I would say is this is something I didn't consider until after the book was out and my husband was reading it and having a bit of a hard time with some of the content, is that sometimes experiences don't always belong solely to you. So if you are writing something that involves someone else and you're fictionalizing it, it might be worth having a chat with whoever that person is to just say, hey, I want to write this. You have every right to write your own experience. It's your story, you tell it.
But how do you want that person to learn about that? Right?
Exactly. You like have that conversation, because I wish I'd done that before it was like in my husband's hands and he was literally looking at me over the top and going, which is very valid, right?
It's a tough call.
That's a hard call for sure.
It's a really, really hard call. And from my experience, which is not anybody else's, the other thing which I've encountered is a lot of the time you'll just put stuff in and not see it. The words that come out always come out in a structure which is unique to you.
Right.
And the example I always give is, before Margaret and I moved in together, I lived in a flat with a friend of mine, and I was in the process of going through a divorce, and I had recorded a lot of Pseudopod ahead of time. And the day I learned that I had been processing the last 3 or 4 years of very unpleasant experiences was when I got in the car with the lift with the other friend who was giving me a lift to the job we shared. And she looked at me and went, "Are you okay?" And I had to think for a moment. I said, "What episode are you up to?" April. Yeah, that was a bad month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It comes out right as well. Like everything I wrote in 2020 is bleak as fuck. There is like no hope, no redemption in it. I'm just tired, bleak, like miserable. Like 2020 was not my best creative year at all.
No, I don't think it's going to be
anybody's.
If it was somebody's best creative year, then that's an accomplishment.
Yeah,
to be honest,
it wasn't mine.
Yeah, no, and you shouldn't try to make it yours either.
No. So it sounds like this process is almost defined for you by catharsis, both unintentional and very intentional.
You were literally like interrogating your subconscious through the writing.
Yeah, and you're forcing yourself to think about things that you quite happily not think about. But that was always my problem, is that I never thought about them until what happened was then I got to a certain age where the lifetime of things I hadn't thought about turned around and went bam and smacked me in the face and fucked me up. So this is my ongoing therapy, is a constant confrontation of like myself and things that are important to me and issues that I stumble across and things I want to say and how I feel, and just it's like a constant growth cycle a little bit, writing in a cathartic way.
What is, like, if you took a step back of it and like you learned that this was the process that another author had gone through, what would you be your kind of like outside view of that? How do you feel about the fact that, like it or not, this is your process? And so there's questions of how much of yourself to put on the page maybe aren't as in your control as you would like them to be.
The thing about books and art and creating is it's intensely personal. Like, not just to the people that create it, but the people that consume it as well. Everybody gets a different experience out of something. So I think I would never presume to kind of say to somebody, you shouldn't be doing this because perhaps it's not very good for you. But I might point out, perhaps to myself, on an ongoing basis, that if you're going to do this kind of thing, have very strict boundaries in place. Have a good circle of people around you. Have some safeguards in. Have some fun projects on the side that you can like
Fluffy kids.
go to and escape to.
Silly
I would.
games.
There are management strategies that you can put in place to like help you through being a cathartic creator. But it's difficult to say, like, if I was looking at what I was doing from the outside in, I would probably be, I don't know, that's a difficult one because because I can't envisage a world in which that would ever happen. Like everyone I come across, every other creator, every other writer, author, whatever, all I ever seem to think when I meet them is, fuck, that's so good. Wow, I love what you're doing. And I'm just so excited about it. I very rarely get beyond that. But yeah, that's a tricky question. I don't know. I have to think about that. And it's relevant to the book because the main character in the book spends most of her time looking at
literally
her own dead
looking
body.
at herself.
So like, yeah,
from outside
it's
herself.
kind of,
so, yeah.
She's quite hard on herself as well, which is part of the whole process of like, stop being hard on yourself. But yeah,
it's an extraordinary book. It really is, and I mean, I've read a lot of your stuff, and all of it is defined by the thing which really sits at the core of Full Immersion for me, which is just how clear-eyed and incredibly perceptive
and brave
as
freaking
shit
brave to
your
do
work
that.
is. My God, dude!
I was drunk. I was not
No.
brave.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing that British thing again where I'm just totally minimizing the biggest achievement of my career so far by going, fuck it. But yeah, I mean, I guess it was quite a brave thing to do, and I do worry that I've exposed myself to judgment.
But every artist does that with any project they put out of their brain and into the world.
You have to let go of it once it's out there.
Yeah,
but, I mean,
exactly.
there are certain things that really worry me. Talk about intrusive thoughts in particular in relation to postnatal health is one of the most terrifying symptoms of being in a state of postnatal depression that many women don't talk about because they're terrified of themselves and then of the repercussions of talking about it. One of the side effects can often be that you have intrusive thoughts, and those intrusive thoughts center themselves around harm to your baby that you perpetrate. And that is utterly terrifying to experience because it's against nature, it's against every instinct that you have, and you don't understand it. You don't understand yourself. It's terrifying in every way, shape, and form. And I've since done a lot of reading and research around it. And one of the things I've realized not only is how common it is, but women just don't talk about it because they don't want social services to come and take the child away, or anybody to judge them, is that actually intrusive thoughts in that sense kind of make sense because they target the things that you care about the most. That's
and
the
they're
nature of
self-reinforcing.
And they're self-reinforcing. And what they actually are a symbol of is that you're going to fail, and you only attach that much significance to failure when it's something you care about deeply. So that's a whole process that I didn't understand. But I've written essentially a book where that's a major part of the narrative, and I'm waiting for the email to come in telling me I'm shit mother, that that I shouldn't be allowed to walk around, and I'm waiting for that. And I've had nasty emails in the past from people who love to troll. I have to be resilient.
Or maybe this is an and situation, and this is one of those situations where you have someone else read your email.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it. It may never happen. So far, the feedback has been primarily from women just saying, holy shit, thank you so much for verbalizing this in a way that I didn't realize I needed or understood, which to me is everything. The other thing that scares me about it is my son features prominently in it, and he's going to grow up at some point and read that book. And so before he's allowed, I have to sit down and have a very strong conversation. He has to be about 55, which is when he's allowed a girlfriend as well.
I see.
Not before. And no, that sounds weird. But like, it's gonna be a really difficult conversation to have, and the reason I wrote that as well, in part, is because I wanted him to understand me better. But there's every possibility that maybe he'll just feel guilty and responsible, and so there's a lot of stuff going on there that makes it very scary, because I'm not just writing a haunted house book, you know. It's my life and it's his life, and so I'm not sure I will ever write a book of that nature that's that brave in that sense ever again.
But on one hand, I'm glad of that, because it means that this was that core thing that you needed to work through in this difficult, very transparent, sheets to the wind kind of way.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that there aren't multiple of those in your life.
Unfortunately, there are. Actually, there's probably about another 7 books worth of shit I need to work through.
Well, okay, on the one hand, if it's successful for you in a good form, great. On the other hand,
I'm actually only 13. I just look this old because I've had a really hard life. I haven't. I actually have had a very fortunate life, but I again did that thing very much minimizing my early years, where I assumed everything was fine, and now in hindsight it's very obvious and very clear that things clearly.
You want to talk about having an adult moment, looking back and going, "Oh no, that was not good, was it?"
That's kind of where we're at now, and there's been a long train of things which will probably come out in my other books, just not to this degree, not to this like this is me kind of version. It'll be more subtle. So
I had a friend who described this perfectly. He always thought of it in terms of a D&D magical item, and that item was the Shield of Banal Ignorance. And it's that when you're younger, and especially if you are, as I'm sure everyone in this conversation and in the chat is, that if you are told you are a gifted child, which is, I'm increasingly convinced, the worst possible thing anyone can tell you.
Yeah, I never had that.
You just, when awful shit happens, you just think, oh well, this is just how things are. This isn't actually awful. It's just okay. And I can remember a very visceral example from my kind of early 20s of when I realized this was not the case. And it was it's the old Bill Hicks routine about why they don't let people in the Texas bookstore depository, because they'll look at the window and go, no fucking way! This is bullshit! And that's such a difficult hill to get across.
Mm-hmm.
And you cross it multiple times, but that first time is always the shittiest one. And
there's a lot of hills.
There's a lot of hills, dude.
I'm wearing out my boots. There's a lot of hills. But that's fine. That's also part of, like, I do feel sad sometimes and wish I could go back and give those earlier versions of me a nicer experience. But then I wouldn't be the person I am. Yeah. I wouldn't be the person I am now. I wouldn't be, like, I'm not saying that, oh, it's all life lessons and all that shit. But, like, I mean, obviously, of course, I would much rather some of those things hadn't happened to me. But they have, and I literally don't have a time machine. I can't go back in time and change that. But all I can do is, like, take control of my now and my future. And part of that involves how I choose to respond to that and I guess use it.
And when you talk about using it, you know, kind of the vibe I take away from this is one of the true powers of art, which is, let me try to encapsulate my experience in such a way that you can find resonance with it, or you can find a warning in it, or you can find hope or instruction in it.
I found an incredible example of this when I was in Amsterdam. I went to a modern art museum, and there was an artist there whose name I have forgotten. I will find in 2 seconds. But she was a musician, a performer. What is her name? I've got it here. And then she was interred in a concentration camp in the Second World War, and she lost the ability to play the instrument. I can't remember what instrument she played exactly. So she turned to art instead. But what she did with the art was she painted these incredible abstract paintings and shapes and geometry, and I'm obsessed with geometry. But they were actually paintings that could be played as musical scores as well,
Holy shit.
which was
Wow.
incredible. Where is it? I've got it here. It is nope. Where is she? She was called Sedge Hemon. And she was an extraordinary woman, and she sort of translated all of her art into musical scores. And she would talk a lot about like the cosmic philosophy she had on life, and just like how to turn something terrible, but still like I'm not. It's difficult, isn't it? Because like in an ideal world, none of that would have happened to her, and she would have been quite happily playing concert halls and for the rest of her life. But she wasn't able to. But instead of give up, she
found another way.
She found another way, right? Like I feel like going back to that Jurassic Park
life
thing
again.
Life finds
you just did
a way.
The very thing you talked about at the top of the stream about going
Didn't
on
I?
100 tangents and then bringing it back in a circle. That was beautifully done.
I'm here all week, chaps.
Quick, let's pretend like we planned that and
All
style it
along.
out. I love it. I love it.
But it was just a very good example for me. And again, I think that's the power of like art and creativity and like how people overcome, right? You can overcome so much. So I wish people didn't have to, but you can. And I think there's something really powerful in that. Like it feels powerful to know that that is a possibility. So
just like you are in the process of doing.
I hope so. Yeah. Although I want to like not overcome for a little bit and just like sit in my pants and eat Pringles and
instead of overcoming, it would be quite nice if there were biscuits.
Yeah. Right.
Totally get that.
I'd be good with biscuits for a bit.
That sounds fantastic.
So
what's next? Because you've hinted at the next book a couple of times. And
yeah. So
Kittens.
the next book,
right?
Yeah, it's the next book is with Cemetery Gates Media, who are a brilliant indie publisher who published this little thing called 6 Rooms,
which is fantastic,
which I adored,
which is my ghosty book, which was great fun to write. And
you know how you mentioned you love geometry.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking love murder houses.
Mm-hmm.
I have
geometry is a feature in every single one of my novels, by the way, at some point, and there's a lot of geometry in the murder house as well.
I appreciated 6 Rooms a lot.
Good, thank you.
My 13 Ghosts loving self was very at home in that book.
I drew a lot on 13 Ghosts and a lot on kind of Julian Fellowes' kind of like movies of like Upstairs, Downstairs, Gosford Park, that kind of thing.
Here is a delightful mansion with a dead person in it. Yes, exactly.
With several dead people in it. So they are brilliant. I've got a really good relationship with them, and I am writing a book called, well, I think we're going to call it The Once Yellow House. Which I might now describe, having come back from Amsterdam, as kind of Van Gogh fan fiction meets David Cronenberg's The Fly via way of The Colour Purple. Not The Colour Purple, sorry. The Nicolas Cage movie with the purple cosmic shit. What's that movie?
Colour Out of Space.
The Colour Out of Space, not The Colour Purple. Silly Gemma. And a few other influences thrown in. It's wildly cosmic. It's very sexy, because I don't really write sex into my books a lot, and I think I need to correct that. It does deal with sex and relationships and love and art and houses, and there are a few Easter eggs in there for fans of both the White Pines universe and the Sunshire Chateau universe, of which they have collided.
I'm expecting an attic with torn yellow wallpaper at this point.
Don't spoil it for them, jeez. No,
we did that story a couple months ago. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. And there's a cult in it as well.
Just for fun.
I like cults.
Always good.
Yeah. So that's fun, and that's coming out next summer.
Oh, nice.
And then I am currently writing a bit of a crime fiction novel with my very good friend V Castro. For anybody that doesn't know V, she is about to release the newest in the Alien franchise of novels. solely based on the character Vasquez.
It's Vasquez's life story. It's
Vasquez's-
a prequel.
It's kind of her.
Give me
it's
hands!
and obviously V is a Latina writer herself,
Yeah.
so the kind of collision of like tradition and culture and sci-fi and alien, it's brilliant. You should all immediately go and pre-order that. That's out from Titan, I think, next month. We are collaborating on a crime novel together, which we hope to find a home for, which we're bashing out some ideas on. I'm also making another short film with a friend of mine who lives in Bristol.
Amazing.
He's an editor and he works on things like Green Planet, and he's wanted to get back into the kind of horror space for a long, long time. So we are making a little short movie about a mask, which is great fun. And I am recording Calling Darkness Season 2. I'll be in that. I am working, I don't know if I can say, I think I can say this. I'm writing a live script for Creepy, who are doing a live show.
Very
Nice.
fun.
Very shortly, and I am hoping that we could do something with the premise of that as well, which is a little bit more long form.
Just a few things.
Just a few things. I
This
hope John won't mind me saying that. I've also got a collection of short stories to finish. I have got so I want to re-release all my books in hardback edition, like special illustrated hardback editions. And I've got some short stories coming out on No Sleep.
So all of the things.
Oh, and I'm writing the screenplay for Dear Laura. so
just a few things.
Just a few things.
Oh my
You're a
gosh,
force
when
of
do you
nature.
sleep?
I don't really. I do
Yeah.
sleep actually very heavily, which is like a running joke in this house. It's like the house could literally burn down around me and I'm like, don't sort it out. I have got what we suspect is quite stringent ADHD, and in some ways it's a little bit of a superpower when you're having a good period, because it means I can work on multiple projects, and that's my happy space, and I'm hyper focused and off I go. And on the super good days, I've had a couple of writing days where I've written 10,000 words in a day, which is insane. Shit. The other end of the spectrum of that is that I'll then have 3 weeks sitting on the couch staring at my toes because I can't function. And I think it's called executive dysfunction, actually. I think there's a term for it, where I literally can't process or think or do anything. So it's very up and down. But when it's up, I'm there. I'm like, let's go, boys. So that I am a chaos merchant in every way, shape, or form, really. I must frustrate everybody around me on a regular basis.
But you're just you. That's your normal.
That's me.
That's you.
That's me. Yeah.
This has been brilliant, Gemma. Thank you so much for coming on to chat with us.
Holy shit, dude. This has been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
I am definitely taking that book with me on vacation.
Damn right.
Oh, I do cover art as well. If anybody wants a cover artist for if you've got a book coming out, I do paintings and things, like cover art, like this little like pumpkin dude.
Look at that little fella.
The little dude. That's Pumpkin Mom, actually. I think that's not Pumpkin Dad. And I've just done one called White Ibis for the lovely Wendy Darrenpool. So I do like colourful art covers. So if anybody needs a book,
I see geometry in that as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Big with the triangles. So if anybody needs a cover artist, do let me know, because it's something I can do that I can do outside of writing, which actually is still a hobby for me.
Nice.
So,
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Outstanding.
Yeah, cool. I'm stop waffling now.
No,
done.
you're all good.
You have been eloquent. You have been on point. You have been incredible.
You took the tangent in a complete circle, and that's the hallmark of all good comedies.
Right.
So
just call
done.
me Billy Connolly.
Right? We'll just call you Gemma Billy Connolly.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Thank you so much. So, chat, we are going to take a minute to take a little break and say goodnight to Gemma. Like usual, go and get yourself a stretch and maybe a drink of water if you need anything, and then we will come back for some shenanigans. So we will be right back.